So, hello everyone and welcome to the second episode of AFC Leyton's RealTalk, the panel discussion that brings you the lowdown on lockdown. Today we have again AFC Leyton's head coach and Charlton Regional Talent Centre team manager Tom.
Good evening everybody.
Our under-15s team manager and a resident stats guru Jake.
Hello, good evening.
Our new under-8s and under-9s team manager and ex-Leyton player herself Stephanie.
Hi.
Our first team player, Emma. This is the first time we've actually had a player on the show, so welcome, Emma.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
And myself, AFC Leyton's club secretary, Louise. On today's discussion, we'll be talking about balancing the books. There is clearly a lack of money in the women's game, even at elite levels, where pro-female players receive £27,000 a year. Male footballers can receive that in one day. So should the women's players receive the same amount of pay as their male counterparts, or the men paid too much? Is it really taking a hit on income and investing in the women's game, or is it an untapped opportunity for brands and investors? Today we ask the question, is the women's game a good investment? Jake, your thoughts?
Right, so I kind of had a bit of a split opinion, because I think I looked at it personally, morally and realistically. Morally, I think, yes, they should be paid equal because they play the same game. You know, it's the same pitch, it's the same goals, the same duration, the same scoring method, the same competitions. However, you know, realistically, at this point in time, no, I don't believe that it's at that level just yet, because of four things: money, the way it's structured. I believe society plays a part, and then lastly, I think realistically, why is because of time. And what I mean is, if you look at how long the women's game has been turned professional in 2017. The men's league was professional, I believe, like 1885 or something like that, like a long time ago. And I believe in time, that's what it's going to take in order to get to a stage where we need it to be, I think.
Do you think it will ever get to that stage, though? I mean, because, you know, we talked about this at the last Real Talk, where the men's game is also increasing. So if the men's game is also increasing, do you think the women's will ever equalise? Do you think we'll ever catch up?
I do, because I looked at tennis, and every competition in tennis is equal winnings between male and female. Wimbledon, the Open, the other major tournaments all pay, or from what I researched, is equal prize money. The difference being is the coverage between scheduling and airtime on TV. That was the main difference within tennis. But I know that in the recent Open, Djokovic and the Sophia Kenin were both paid the same amount of winning. So I know that it's possible in other sports. So I don't see why it can't be brought eventually into football.
So do you think then that women should be actually paid? Because the men's wages are absolutely obscene. Yeah. You know, is there an argument that the women's wages increase, but they don't have to get to such obscene levels? You know, or do you think that they should be, as you've said, playing the same game? Do they get the same pay? Is that?
I think maybe it's proportionate to investment, sponsorship, viewing figures, stadium capacity, ticket sales. There's loads of things involved, which I'm sure we'll get into later in the video.
The big player within money in football is agents. The women have agents. I'm not too sure, but as Jake alluded to,
they do have it, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so then you look at, well, the agents can demand money and the amount of money because of the amount of money in football anyway, coming from TV first and foremost. I like the idea of what they're trying to do in terms of the amount of people that you can have in your stadium is kind of how the money that you've got to spend. So you don't outspend within your means, but it's a difficult one. I think, as I said in the previous pod, women's football is years behind men football. Can it get there? I'm not too sure, just because it's got a little bit like fantasy football, men's football. You know, the media. I heard something on the radio the other day. The fee and the value of a player, who actually makes that? The club obviously will have a certain, an idea based on their age, contract that they're on at the club. But in terms of the 40, 50, 60 mil plus, that's the media. And the media have a lot of influence on that.
So going back to the women's game not getting enough media coverage, because we're not getting a fair share and a fair slice in that. If you perpetuate something in the media, we've seen there's been a 31% of girls aged between 12 and 15 regularly play football since the 2019 Women's World Cup. That is because of exposure. Growth, media equals growth, media equals more money. So is it not that we're not getting enough coverage, which is not allowing the game to grow?
So with Sky, they've obviously got the football program, and I think they've also got the Premier League channel. So you've got I think they've got 8 channels across Sky, but the Formula 1, cricket, etc. Could they not offer a women's only one? So then people have got the choice. So that could be a way in which the kind of gap, if you like, gets smaller, because then you're giving people the opportunity to tune in. You're giving the clubs the funding and the exposure of, look, yes, as I said to the other day, Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock, 9 times out of 10, it's men's football. Women's football is Sunday at 2 o'clock. Why can't it be Saturday 3 o'clock at the same time? Whether that could be a start in terms of having a specific channel for women's only.
I mean, just on your point there, Tom, before we did this call, there was two games on. There was Tottenham, and then there was the Liverpool Man United game, and now there's City playing now. But at the same time, Tottenham ladies were also playing West Ham. Now, I didn't even know that was on. I can't lie, until I looked at my Twitter feed after the game, and Tottenham had won 1-0, I believe. But I didn't know it was on.
Yeah.
And I follow them on my social media, but I didn't see it on any of the other chats.
There's simply no hype. There's no hype about it.
I think that kind of
actively searching, don't you?
I think that kind of comes on what we kind of spoke about last time as well, about kind of the media coverage, and there's obviously not enough for it. Like, you look at the men's game, and where the money's coming from is, like Tom said, from Sky. They're constantly playing kind of their brand deals. And do you know what I mean? Like, you look at a football boot and a little kid will be like, oh, I want that boot because Ronaldo wears it, or it's Neymar. Do you know what I mean? It's that face, and you don't have that for the women's game. You don't look at a brand or something on social media and it's a woman player. Do you get what I mean?
On that, Steph, I had a player in my under 15s that turned up in a Barcelona kit to training a little while ago, and I remember, and I said, "Oh, who you got on the back? Messi?" No, it was one of the female players. Tony Duggan. That was it. I wasn't sure if she played for Barcelona or Atletico Madrid. I couldn't remember, but it was Tony Duggan on the match. I'm like, you know what? They do actually look up. So there is a market, and there is definitely a need to promote it even more.
Yeah, because I think that's down to the person, like an individual themselves. Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of the time when my nines do it, actually, when I say, oh, well, what footballer do you really want to play today, or do you get something like that, and I get one of the players would be like, I'm not Steph Houghton, or this person or that person, and most of the time it is actually a female footballer. But I think that's down to them themselves, because they love football so much. They want to look up to people themselves. But then it's like, when you look on a bigger scale, you're not going to see a lot of people wearing kind of like a Barcelona top with a women's player on.
And the influence there, of course, could be the parents, because the parents have thought, my daughter's playing football for an all-female club. I want to give them some aspirational role models to look up to. So the parents are influencing that a bit more than just children in general. So that
I do also think that women and girls are constantly looking for a female representative to look up to. I just wanted to take it back to the panel that you talked about last week, because I think that's really important, because I think that's where it starts from. So from my perspective, I think this all links into the fact that we're so far behind. So it starts from that point. So when Jake was saying about tennis and about kind of equal opportunities there, but the difference there is that there's been the investment in female tennis that we haven't had the same in female football or women's football. So from my perspective, until we start to see the investment, the media coverage, all of those things that we've seen in the men's game, which means all of the stuff that we've already talked about, you get the coverage, you get people enthusiastic, you get the investment, that all encompasses what then gets you to the position where we are in the men's game. We don't have that in the women's game. We're so far behind. We can't even get football pitches to book to be able to play. So until we're on a level playing field just on the basics, how can we expect to have, one, the investment that we want, two, to actually get people, whether it's women, men, everything in between, to be excited about the women's game? You can't even get it to, to be able to watch it on the TV. All of these things are really important to be able to build up that momentum around people wanting to watch it, because I don't believe that men don't want to watch women's football. I don't believe it's just specific to women wanting to watch that. But everything that everyone's just said, until you have that buzz, that hype around individual players, etc., until you have the money that's going around that the whole business of football for women, we're never going to be on the same playing field as men. It's simple.
I completely agree with that with Emma, because there was actually time, I don't know, when West Ham were playing against City in the FA Cup final, and I went to that, and that had a really big hype towards it, and never got quite why, because no other game had actually had like such a big hype for a women's game. And when I went, I'm not even joking, there was most of kind of Wembley was filled, and it wasn't just loads of girls or whatever. It was actually, there were people that were walking around with normal West Ham tops, and they just wanted to watch a game of football. That's what I agree with Emma's point. It's not just women watching the football, it's a mixture. I mean, it's a game of football.
Can I throw a point in there?
Go on then.
I actually wanted to look at ticket prices, because I know personally that if I was to go to a game, I normally pay around £40, £50, £60 for a ticket. I just chose 5 or 6 teams at random in the WSL. Arsenal, for example, they charge £70 for every game of the season. That's their season ticket price, £70. Whereas the men's team, they're the second highest in the world, I believe, at 1,329. I know, and then these are ridiculous. Man United, for example, they charge where is it? £39 for the year. £39 for the year. That's the equivalent of me going to half a game at Spurs. Whereas the men's is about £800 or £740 for the year.
I think if I can,
there's more money coming in. Tom, you mentioned about living within your means. Well, they need to have the means to be able to do the means.
I think it's also, I don't know whether supply and demand is the right terminology, but I wrote down USP. Now, if you look at the Championship many moons ago, maybe 30 years ago, the Championship wasn't as dramatised as it is now. The whole playoff final, it's thrown in your face around May and June time, the biggest game in British football in terms of how much money's at stake. Well, that's only came about because people have spoke about it. And actually, you could argue maybe the Championship felt a little bit left behind from the Premier League. The Premier League expanded from a small number of teams getting through to the Champions League to now all of a sudden it's down to the top 7. It was maybe the top 4 years ago. So, does the women game have to, again, I said it last week in terms of trying to follow the men's game. By following the men's game, are you only going to limit yourself, or does the women game kind of come up with a USP of themselves? So all of a sudden, actually, yes, the men's game is this, but look, we're offering this and we're doing this. And all of a sudden, you could start to create your own buzz around women's football. My opinion is if you try and go along with the men's route, it's always going to be one step behind. Why? I'm not too sure. Is that society? that's just my gut feeling. I think maybe they need to come up with something. I spoke about changing kind of pitch, like small subtle things, but actually make the women's game the women's game.
I think you're right. I think the women's game should be viewed as completely separately to the men's game. Like I said, I think we're going into a dangerous area, as Estelle mentioned last week, talking about actually changing the pitch itself, because that leaves the women's game open to so much criticism. And I'm not sure it's completely necessary to do that. However, I do think it should be viewed in its own right. We shouldn't be comparing male and female footballers. They are different. We are biologically different. Women don't want to be men. You know, that's not what we're trying to achieve. We're just trying to create our own game and our own environment for that. So I completely agree that it does need to be looked at differently, looked at separately, stop comparing us. Yes, we probably shouldn't be following the path of the men. When I took over AFC Leyton, as you know, Tom, you and I sat down and we looked at reinventing this club. We run it completely different to other clubs. We ditched the old school attitude and changed our approach entirely. And I do think there is value and an opportunity there to lead the way and do something different. What that is, you know, that's the big question, isn't it?
That's that thing of, like, I agree with, like, obviously when we speak about, obviously we're so far behind the men's game, and it's obviously if we're constantly playing catch up, it's like Jake said, that will we always be at that point of always catching up? Do you know what I mean? Because if that's still kind of elevating like the men's game, and obviously we're going to be kind of behind it, it's kind of that thing, as I agree with Tom, of making it its own thing. Do you know what I mean? It's women's football, and you kind of elevate in their own space rather than going, okay, we want to try and be like the men's game, we want to try do this, we want to try do that.
But then,
and by that idea as well, Jake spoke last week about women's games having proper stadiums to play in. You know, these are the elite players. And was that the point you were about to make?
Yeah.
But literally, you know, and within reinventing that view, you know, reinventing the fact that stadiums don't have to be funded through ticket sales. You know, these stadiums are completely stadiums, the way that they're built now, they're built to monetize. So monetize another way. So you're talking about all these events. X Factor's held in, I think it's the Emirates Stadium. You know, you can hold multifunctional events in their conferences. So stadiums can be monetized in other ways, but built for the women to actually have a proper place to play. It looks awful, doesn't it? Let's face it. You go and watch the Women's Super League, some of these games, you go and it looks so low rent. It really does. You know,
well, most of them play at training grounds, or like, I remember when I went to before, when West Ham was like the season before they went to just before it was WSL, and it was literally one stand sides, and it was about £2 to get in, and that was it. And that was a season before they're going into WSL.
Was it full though? Was that stand full or nearly full?
No, it was literally.
You could argue,
that's
why
what I
do
mean.
they need a bigger stadium?
But you've just said that it's not been promoted. You didn't even know the game was on.
Yeah, you don't. Only reason
I'm just
why.
trying to say why that's not been put in place, because they don't
see. The thing is, that's what I mean.
It's like sell out.
Like Lou said, it's about advertising. The only reason why I knew about it is because my coach used to play for West Ham, so that was the only reason why I knew about it. And we would go as like a team to go watch her. But then, in the sense of it does come down to what Lou said. It was no advertising about it. They weren't even the WSL by then, like at that point. So it was like it was 10 times worse.
Women aren't used to promoting themselves either. So I think it's that thing. I think even when it comes to kind of teams and how they promote themselves, even when like I follow Arsenal, etc. When it comes to their big games, if you follow them on Twitter, etc., people, they're not tweeting about it. I'm just like, wow, like, come on, like that should be just natural. I play for the Super 5 League private side. I'm tweeting all the time. I'm just like, I don't care that I've got about 10 followers on Twitter, but I'm just like, I want to get it out there, because it's almost like I'm proud to be part of something, even if it's only small. If I was playing for Arsenal, everyone would bloody know about it. You know, it's just
that's down to the players as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's more. It's like you look at Dele Alli. So you look at Dele Alli, the constant posting about this brand, that brand, and you look at other players, and it's like when they play big games, I'll get ready for this game, get ready for that game. It, like you said, it's like they're not very good with social media.
It goes back to what we spoke about last week in terms of having the right people within your organisation. Now, again, we spoke, you was talking about how do we get people to know about the women's game, and again, I put down TV companies, but I also just echoed what Emma said. Clubs themselves, they need to do their own self-promotion, and if they haven't got the desire to go and do that, then, well, I'm sorry, it's, how can you try and have...
However, does this not come down to resources? Because these clubs clearly do have that in place. They're doing it for the men's game. They're just not providing it for the women.
Try and balance.
An entire marketing department at Arsenal pushing out so much content for the men, that's not happening for the women. So this is again about
how many women's club out there are a separate entity to their male club?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. And why are they? Why? It's the same badge.
Exactly. Surely you to even the playing field up, the Premier League could have a women's team. And as you said, yeah, if we're going to plug for the men's cup game next week, well, actually the women's have got the same. So what we do, and the same marketing, the same social media manager, they do the same job for the women. So
only 2 tweets.
Yeah, why isn't that happening then? I suppose the question is why. Who can you ask that? Is
this not simply discrimination? Women are simply not discriminated against. They are not viewed as equal. It's not a level playing field. We're not getting our equal share, even though there's all this noise and coming from everywhere, from the FA, from UEFA. Everybody's talking about investment and equality. Are we actually seeing it? Are the right people in these clubs driving this change? I don't think that's true. I don't think it's happening. I'm not seeing it happening.
I think you have to measure it over time to where you was to where we are now. Like, just looking at, I couldn't find that much information, but I just looked at prize money and stuff like that, because I thought that's a good way of seeing how much money is actually being invested. And, in 2007, it was £6 million for winners. In 2011, so 4 years later, it was 10 million. In 2015, it was 15. And then this year, it's jumped up, doubled to 30 million. So in how many years is, what's that, 16 years or so, it's gone from 6 million to 30 million. So there is progress. It's just maybe not happening overnight that we kind of want to see.
I think women don't expect it to happen overnight, but I think what Louise is saying is it's systemic discrimination, and that's what it's not just in football, it's across sport, and I think most people acknowledge that that's the case. And I think, isn't it the USA women's team have got a law case going out against it in relation, because again, it's not just, I don't think it's fair to say that we just expect that we have equal pay. I think it goes way beyond that. I think we can all acknowledge that when you're thinking about how clubs earn money, when it's relation to like supporters and how they pay for tickets, etc., broadcasting, and then competition, in terms of the prize funds, etc., the women's game at this point is never going to be in competition with the men's. But I think in order to make up for the loss of the women's game in terms of underfunding, not having any coverage, etc., we're trying to bridge that gap. And I think it's just for me and for other women, I think it's about being in a position where we feel like there is a drive to bridge that gap. And I think when we say things like, oh, it's coming along, it's better than it was 16 years ago, well, yeah, bully for you. But I think what we need to know is that it's happening, and it's not happening quick enough. I don't think. I think that's the bottom line. And I think daily is that because there's systemic discrimination, that means it's never going to change. We need more women involved, or men who can see that there's discrimination, who are willing to push those barriers and also, smash it up a bit.
Absolutely. Because, we've obviously just had the very senior member of the FA resign because he said that girls don't like having balls hitting them. It's that sort of outdated attitude still existing in the FA. And, so again, it's just all of this talk about progressive attitudes and things that we need to do, but are the right people in those roles to take this forward? Is the attitude there? Is the will and drive and desire there? Again, yeah, you're right, it's happening too slow, it feels tokenistic. You know, we do need a big shift, I think, a seismic shift in balancing the books.
Well, as I said last week, Lou, about time, share.
Sorry?
I said last week about, you know, time and mindsets, because as I said last week about speaking to people that are from an older generation, thinking the game isn't very good, and they won't go and watch it because they had this belief. From someone who's half their age, I don't believe that, but I'm half their age. You know, when I'm their age, hopefully I can pass on what I believe to the younger generation, and it will, as we just spoke about, systemically, you know, be out of the game, be pushed aside a lot more. But the amount of people that are in that generation, they're not going away for a long time.
I'd rather not wait until you're an old man, though, Jake.
Well, I think that's what the
point is. That's where they are now. You can't just oust them out. Like I think it was Greg Clark had to resign because of his comments, rightly so.
Yeah, it was Greg Clark. I wasn't going to name him.
Unless they all say that and get caught for it, there's no way of getting them out. So they have to then retire, and then someone else with new ideas has to get in.
But what if we took the same approach to racism?
Yeah, well, I think, as we know, both issues are something that are very, very important to a lot of people and need to change.
But I think that's what it comes down to, like what Tom says about society changing. These things in football, whether it's racism or sexism, it will not change unless society changes, unless their views change. At the end of the day, and it is. I get what you mean, but it's like
that Emma's making is, of course, there's a lot of noise. You know, we've got the BLM movement, kick it out. You know, say no to racism, show racism the red card. It's quite high media. You know, there's loads of exposure about it. Do we have that level of exposure for women in general?
That's the thing. It's like what I was going to say was, even though Jake's saying, we've got to wait for them to kind of get out, and then new people, it's that whole thing of we shouldn't wait, like wait, but as in like for the people there, it's like the reason why they're still expressing their views and saying, well, it's not going to change because they're still there. It's about trying to change society's views so that we can make a difference now, rather than going, oh, we've got to just, they're keeping their views to themselves, but we know they think it, kind of thing.
Yeah, but I'm saying they're not going to change their minds. They're not. Like you have opinions about certain things. It's very hard for someone to change your opinion, and especially as the older you get, the less you're able to adapt and I believe that you're less able to change your viewpoint because you've had them for a very long time. It's like
you could
habits.
say the same about racism, so we could say, well, let's stop bothering to talk about racism then.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same in terms of, you know,
I disagree.
20, 30 years time. In 20 or 30 years time, I know that's too long, but just as an example, I'm hoping that we're not having these conversations because the generations coming through are going to have a different view on the world and how we should approach things.
I still do think there's going to be that slight thing, because even like me, like I still know a lot of people, and especially kind of like the male people, they're very much a lot like this male people, but you get what I mean, but like they're kind of more against women football, even though we're saying yes, we're changing. I think it's like we said last time, you have to be involved in that environment to kind of understand what women's football is. And I think it's going to be very hard to keep saying, oh, we're just going to have to wait for these people to filter through because this generation will be different. I just don't think it will be, purely because
I get very defensive about women's football. Whenever I hear someone say it's not exciting, it's not good to watch, I get really annoyed and I really start getting my back up and defending it because as I say, I'm involved in it.
That's what I mean. But then if you have someone that isn't involved in it, they might not have that same view, and that's the problem. We can't just have to hope.
But do you not think
this
is not supported by the club? So not mentioning the club or the particular journalist that this occurred to, but you may have seen the social media storm that hit on a certain female player reporter who made some comments about a Premiership club, and the club diced her up and served her to the fans. And what ensued was, of course, a load of misogyny. She was attacked online, bullied, and has since had to delete her Twitter account. Is that appropriate behaviour for a pro club to behave, knowing the misogyny that would have happened? Is that treating her as someone that they believed was equal to them? You know, this is a woman that had a very long and established football career, had earned her right to be there and to comment. And I think it was highly inappropriate what the club done. The club has not apologised. It's just obviously said that, you know, the abuse wasn't necessary. But I think that the way they did it, they knew what was going to happen. You know, what are your thoughts on that particular incident? Do you all know what I'm talking about, first of all?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My original thought was, before I'd like heard and read into it a lot, my original thought was, well, I hear them say that, not in that kind of detail, but I hear them criticize reporters all the time. I see on social media, or this pundit is absolutely, you know, doesn't know what he's talking about. But then when I actually looked into it, I'm like, I think that's gone a little well over the, you know, that edge, because they called her out, they put it on their, you know, social media, and this is not just like a random person like I'm talking about, you know, on the street, on Twitter. This was actually an established, verified account, and I just think it is so far crossing that line. I thought it was quite bad, to be honest. Quite disgraceful.
And that just says to me, that speaks volumes to me, that the clubs are not valuing females, the female voices within, you know, if you've got an entire proper club from their blue tick verified accounts serving up a journalist in such a way, a pundit in such a way, is just where are we at with equality really in all of this?
I was speaking to a friend about this, and they had the viewpoint of, well, if you're a pundit and you criticize, you got to expect criticism back.
Criticism is not the same as abuse.
No, of course. But and that was what I said back to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
She attacked the way they played and the way, you know, what they were doing, and they've attacked her personally. And I just thought that was the bit that's crossed the line. But I mean, I saw that presenter. She was on telly like one of the next games, so at least she is not like stopped. She's still on there. She's still showing her face, kind of thing. I thought that was quite good from her as well.
But I think that situation kind of just showed how behind and how far behind we actually are for that. Because like Jake said, you see pundits, they make mistakes and they say things and they get slated for it, but never once has it gone to this extreme where they've actually kind of like a team took it to their social media page just because they're offended. At the end of the day, there's pundits that I sit there and you listen to them and they might be biased, or they just say things like, what are you thinking about? You don't see any other team. And I think that does show how far behind we really are.
And the lack of, for me, that just points to an overall mentality and lack of support from the pro clubs. Women don't have access to the same facilities. They don't train alongside the men. You know, they're often sent off at some low rent training, facility.
Well, that was like that Marine kind of article they made about with like Liverpool, where like they had the FA Cup game and Liverpool opened their training facilities and their training ground for Marine because they were playing an FA Cup game against Tottenham, but then you've got the Liverpool kind of women's team and they're saying we've never been offered that, we've never had that access, and we're playing week in and week out as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it just does show that it's like they'd rather support a team because they're playing against a male Premier League team compared to their actual team realistically.
So does the equality in the game and the investment in the game need to start with the actual clubs
100%.
valuing their teams the same?
100%.
I don't know why it kind of irks me when I get the you know, a club will post out and it'll say, you know, Arsenal or Arsenal women's. They don't say Arsenal men's. You know, there's always this assumption that the women's is just a side thing to the actual.
Like the Tottenham, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but Tottenham do sometimes, they do promote their women's team.
They do every game. They put like a really good comment. That's the reason I knew they were playing today.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Both, but
it's kind of like when you look at kind of the other like teams, not every single team. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all right for Tottenham to do it, like one team to do it, but then it's like, what about the rest of them? Do you know what I mean?
Tottenham
It's
actually
just,
took them under their wing a little bit, because they used to be called Spurs Ladies. It wasn't
yeah.
until 2 years ago Tottenham said, change your name to
Guys,
Tottenham.
I think you're looking at this through rosy glasses because you're Spurs fans. I know that when Chloe Morgan left Spurs,
Of course.
she absolutely said that there was no equality there. It wasn't a good environment. She was saying there was no integration with the men's team. They weren't allowed access to the same facilities. So, you know, I think she's got a very different picture of being in that environment.
Oh, I know 100% that it is probably that, but it's kind of like, I know it's not a big thing, but little things like that. Yeah, like little things like that, where it's that kind of social media push. It's like,
so we're grateful for the more.
That's what I mean. It's like,
the little scraps that we get, we're grateful for.
And it's bad that we're doing that. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh my God, we're really happy that they're retweeting, but then it's like, at the end of the day, that's what it's coming down to now. We have to be like, oh my God, they're retweeting it. It's got acknowledged for once.
Are the men paid too much?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Has the whole environment just gone a bit crazy? The men are just given too much money, too much exposure. You know, is this a problem?
You're telling me it's acceptable for someone to earn 300 grand a week?
Yes, because they demand. No, but listen, if they can afford to pay someone that, why can't they? Why are we saying everyone has to limit?
Hang on a minute. You're saying, you know, we're saying about investment in the women's game, that, you know, where's the money? The money's right there. You're paying people 300 grand a week. The money's there.
Yeah, I understand that, but if you don't pay the best players, your team, your club, your brand doesn't become successful, and then they lose.
Tom presented the question: should men's wages be capped? So if we're globally capping the wages, does that then mean you don't get the players?
Oh, as I said, cap the wages, you then turn football from an entertainment into a sport, into an art. At the minute, football is a global entertainment with a pound note at the end of it. And you look at teams that are paying £100,000 a week plus, it's not the club. You look at the owner. You know, your local businessmen that help out with a local football club, they ain't paying those big boy wages because they can't. You know, these fortunate people that have got businesses all over the globe, they can afford, it's loose change to them. So are footballers paid too much? In my opinion, no, because it's actually the person that's willing to pay them. That's their issue. You know, if someone was to say to all of us, look, we're going to pay you X amount to coach a team or run a media, what, are you going to go, no, it's too much money.
So the issue is,
sorry, the question, has it ruined the competition? Because as we're talking about then, especially if you look at the Premier League, you've got the top six who can afford to buy the best players, etc. You know, where's the competition for the rest?
Flip it. Is that happening in the women's game already?
Look at Lyon, for example. The top three highest paid women's players that all play for Lyon. You
look at Manchester United. How long ago did they have a women's team? How long ago did they have an RTC? All of a sudden, they're challenging for the title.
They're top.
Yeah. But we said at the beginning of this discussion that we don't. Is it following suit because that's just what football clubs know, and that's how it's going to be? The whole thing is we're having a discussion here about are men paid too much? Does it ruin the competition? I think we can all agree that there's an element of ruining the competition based on money. Like you say, Tom, if someone's willing to pay you 300k a week, people are going to accept that. The agents are going to negotiate it. That's just how it rolls. But the difficulty is currently, because of how football works, you've got the agents negotiating the fees, you've got the supporters who pay for tickets to go and watch the top clubs. All of the lower level clubs haven't got a look in. Broadcasting, if you think about the fans and the fan experience as well, whether it's women's football or men's football, you have to pay for tickets. So again, as Jake said at the beginning, a season ticket for the top clubs compared to other football clubs. If you want to watch a game, it's Sky, BT Sports, etc. All of these things, if you think about the men's game, and then how are women going to follow suit on that? Is it going to be similar to that? Are you then excluding people so poorer people can't watch games?
I think that's the way football's going in general. I really do.
That's when this whole pandemic problem, obviously, the first thing they did was if you want to watch a football game, you've got to pay to watch your team. Any game you want, if it's not been
that got
that obviously
that got really
that got removed kind of quickly, but things like that it's like you pay monthly for Sky anyway, and then you've then got to pay on top.
It's interesting because what you said, Jake, about Lyon. Do you know how much? The top women have played at Lyon?
Yeah, I actually got that right in front of me. So the top three, so they earn 300k a year. So Wendy Renard, she's on 298,000 a year. Amanda Henry is on £308,000 a year, and then Ada Hedgerberg, I believe. Apologies if I've said their name wrong. She's on £343,000 a year.
And that's like senior management wages, isn't it?
It's a great wage. It's a great wage.
Type wages, and I think that's actually very decent. And should that not be enough for the men?
So yeah, I mean, it should be enough for anyone. But if someone's offering you that a week, what one are you going to take? But then just to look at the top earners in England, because obviously that's in France, is Steph Houghton, England captain, plays for Man City. She's on 65k a year. So already within the women's game, I can see £300,000 a year, 65,000. And then I just looked at Lucy Bronze, who's another England international. I think she might have won Best Female Player of the Year. She's on 40k a year.
I think that goes back to.
But that's just but that's just how much she's paid at Man City. Obviously, when you look at money you get from England, they pay them I think it's like £25,000 a year from England as well, and there's like more like bonuses up to like £5,000 of bonuses that you get from.
But that's for me, that's not elite wages at all.
Yeah,
that's a good wage, not elite.
And that's my point. Though my point was just that it's not like good. If I just wanted to say that the comparison between like France, who have got probably the best team with Lyon, they're already generating more money to get the best players.
But I think that stuff
England are moving to France.
I think that comes down to what Tom said actually about the owner of the club. Do you know what I mean? It's down to what they want to put their money into. Do you know what I mean? It's like in France, they're choosing to put their money into these female players, and like Lyon's choosing to do that. And it's like when you look down at us, it's kind of like we're not choosing to do it. And I agree on kind of Tom's point in that sense of that it's down to that kind of that owner and the people that own them, like their club, for them to say, right, we're going to pay them this amount of money.
So do we need more women taking over clubs? Do more business women need to buy clubs and invest?
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure Southampton used to be owned by a lady. I think she inherited it from her dad or something like that who died. And I don't know much about it. I'm just but I know that she at one point Southampton's owner was a woman. I don't know. I think she might
inherited
again
it after someone died.
No, it was her dad, and she obviously
She was.
That.
Yeah, it was. I just researched it.
Again, you say there should more women own or run football clubs, did you say, correct, Lou?
I just said own, but yes, absolutely.
Own, okay. But again, you ask, again, especially using that elite word that you keep saying, how many of those owners are in it to make money, or are they in it just to be a part of football? Now,
honestly, they're in it for the love and passion of the game, and it's about growing that love and passion, isn't it?
Definitely.
Oh, it is. It is, Tom. I'm sorry. All the owners are just not in for the money.
Sorry, okay, pause. Have you seen Manchester City again? I know this is a women's podcast, but have you seen Manchester City and how many clubs they have bought across the globe? So yeah, they own them. So basically, if
one in America, one in Australia,
they've got one on every continent in the world. So if they have a good player come through that team, Man City, and go, thank you, well, come and play for Man City. So basically, they are throwing a blanket over continents to say, look.
And that's created a conveyor belt of players, but it still doesn't mean that the owner that's in charge of it doesn't love it. And this prestige, this prestige with owning a club as well. You've got your Arabs, and they all want to invest all of this money into these clubs because there's a prestige. Why can't we get that prestige with the women's game? Why can't we get that investment?
Because the opposite of what you just said, it's not for the love of it, it's to make money. And at the moment, they're not making money from
people.
That's what investment means. If the investment means you put money in.
And that's what I'm trying to say. But if they invest, are they going to get a quick return? Or is it going to take a long time? Business people, I should say, are in it for money, and they're in it for a quick turnover. They're not in it for
not necessarily quick turnover. Every bank's lending out all this money for mortgages because they know they'll get their money back over 30 years. It's not about a fast turnover all the time. It's about playing the long game. And are we missing out on opportunities playing the long game with women's football?
I think we are. I think, well, not me personally. I think the people that have that kind of money to invest probably are, because where it is now, it can only get bigger. So, it's like, why not invest now? It's like if you was to invest in stocks, like if you had invested in Bitcoin 30 years ago when it was worth like a cent, it's now like 40k each for one Bitcoin, and they're almost all gone anyway. So if you invest when it's cheap now.
Well, what about brands? Let's talk about brands. Let's talk about Nike, Barclays, SSE. They've all put significant money into promoting the female game. Why aren't other brands doing this? Why aren't other brands actually going, look, we can actually, use this as a platform to promote us. It's actually good business to show the equality and diversity. Why do you think that they're not picking up on and promoting more?
Anyone? Do you think oh, sorry, Tom. Do you think it's partly because of everything we've already discussed, Louise, in terms of, just all the basic stuff isn't quite there yet? Until the basics are there, like grassroots, equality and access to pitches, having a sort of level playing field just in all of that, and the investment in terms of, at school age and above, etc., all of that, to be able to say, yes, I'm going to invest in that because actually I can see that all the way along, there's a reason to invest in this. I think at the moment it's so hit and miss along every single level that we talk about, that investors, so you've got the bigger companies that have the kind of, the social responsibility, all of those things that are wanting to get their brand and their name out there for various different aspects of different things. So for women's football, that's a great thing to attach their brand to. But for lots of other investors, maybe it's about, well, actually, until you get that right, maybe it is a little bit too risky. This is me. I have no idea whether that's
sure.
correct, but just basing it on maybe there's too many unknowns currently about the women's game.
Tom?
Could the government or an organisation not force someone's hand and go, well, okay, again, equality, if you're putting in X amount in the male game, similarly to grassroots, I don't know whether it's true or not, but a certain percentage of a transfer fee filters down to the grassroots. Whether you can put some form of sponsorship, even an ownership, if you are owning a football club, male football club. But it will work both ways, So if the women are only getting income in through whatever sources, actually, again, equality, it would have to work both ways. But again, whether there's a certain box that you create for it to be ticked for then equality to happen.
It is what we mentioned kind of a lot last thing. It was very much, it kind of starts from the top. Do you know what I mean? And it's like it kind of starts, and it's never going to change if the top don't change.
So again, just going back to your point, Lou, in terms, if we could just make everything happen and go correct tomorrow. I'm seeing the facility side and the struggle in terms of if every football club had a male and female team, training logistics would be a nightmare. The academies would, well, as I say, unless you're going to invent another day within the week or extend the day from 24 hours to 36, how on earth? I mean, these academies that are operating under 7s, 8s, all the way through to 16s, they train 3 nights a week potentially. How could they incorporate the same for the women? See what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to look at that as the view that, you know, I live literally, I don't know, 5-minute walk to the Arsenal, you know, academy ground. That's the boys' ground. They've got a similar one for the girls, but it's way out in St Albans. You know, clubs, they can just have these two facilities that are, I don't know what the St Albans facility looks like, by the way. I've only seen the boys' one because that's what I live next door to. But, you know, there's a nice purpose-built facility. It's beautiful. I don't see why that can't be replicated for every club, male and female. We're not talking about shared space, but we're talking about equal access.
There's 92 football clubs across Prem, Champ, League 1, 2 and National. We times that by 2, that's 184. So that's an additional 92 centres that you have to find, create. Yeah. How the hell do you go about doing that?
Why not?
I mean, we're only an island. Is there space to? I mean, they won't build new houses, let alone.
No, there's definitely space for it. England is a very, very green country still, despite what everybody says. There is plenty of space to build these facilities. You can take over, you know, derelict ones. We've got an entire stadium just around the corner in Leyton, a stadium that is just derelict that could be used right now. A female.
Last week, I know I made a point about the schools helping out and almost allowing everyone the opportunity, especially young girls, you know, the opportunity to play football and experience it. Are you now saying that potentially councils, you know, the door to the council's offices have to be knocked on and saying, look, all these buildings that are just sitting there doing nothing and have been for some time, there's a need for another market to kind of take over that and run with it?
I think that's twofold. I think you talk at grassroots level, there's definitely enough space to build some dedicated facilities for female sports at a grassroots level. But on the other side, the clubs, they've got the money, they've got the capacity, they can certainly get all the consultants in to source these locations, you know, to go through the design built companies, the built assets companies to create these assets for them and to set that up. That's there, you know, and, you know, yes, we are talking an awful lot of money, but I have no doubt, no illusions whatsoever that these clubs can afford to do that. That can be implemented. The Football Foundation have also got the money to distribute that at grassroots level as well. It's all about identifying those places. Pardon?
On the Football Foundation, they've got they've just released it. I don't know when it was released, but it was recently a 10-year plan.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And you know they've committed to improving 20,000 grass pitches, building 1,000 3G pitches and 1,000 new pavilions within the next 10 years.
Yeah, I've looked at this, but again, it's not been absolutely clear on where these are going, the pricing structure for them. Go on, sorry.
I was just saying, it's good that they're building 1,000 new ones, but
it's not really clear where. Yeah, well, no, it's not enough.
Area.
It's not enough. You know, but it's not clear where they're going, the pricing structure for those, where, you know, are you required to have tenure to have that? What about the most clubs don't have tenure? So there's a whole host of questions associated with that, but it is as Emma said, it's systemic. The infrastructure isn't there. All these things do go some way to creating that, and hopefully we'll see change as soon as possible. Any final comments before we call it a day, guys?
All
done.
That was a good discussion.
Okay, yeah, it was a good discussion. Okay, so we'll leave it there.
Agreement as well.
Yeah, last week it went like, not last week, a couple of days, the last one it just kind of went off.
It was tangent after tangent.
It went into a different place by the end of it. It was like, okay then.
Okay, great. So we're going to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. So next time we're going to have a real talk on challenging homophobia and stereotypes. But until then, thank you all for watching. Thank you guys for joining. We'll see you soon.